All right, so today we're going to do something really cool. We're diving deep into just one single verse from an ancient spiritual text. And this isn't just any verse. It tackles, one of the biggest questions out there. Where does all this come from?
So let's start with a question. And honestly, this is the universal question, right? It's something that's been on people's minds for thousands of years. It's the kind of thing that drives pretty much everything. Science, philosophy, you name it.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Have you ever just looked up at the night sky, at all those stars, and just wondered, how did all of this get here? What's the real origin story for the stars, for our planet, for us?
Well, a foundational text called the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, it doesn't wait. It doesn't bury the answer in some chapter halfway through. Nope. The very first verse jumps right in and tackles this question head-on. It's basically set up as a direct answer to that exact curiosity we all have.
Okay, so the verse kicks off with this line, Om namo bhagavate vāsudevāya. It's an invocation, right? A show of respect to Vasudeva, who is Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa. And he's called the Personality of Godhead. Now that's important because it immediately frames the whole thing not as some cold, impersonal formula, but as something conscious. We're talking about a supreme, personal source.
And boom, right there, you get the main idea. The text puts it out there that everything, and I mean everything, comes from one single original source. It calls this the absolute truth and describes it as being totally conscious, completely independent, and basically the ultimate domino that started every other chain reaction you can think of. The cause of all causes.
So, okay, if there's this primeval cause, what does it actually do? Well, the verse doesn't just leave you hanging, it gets into the nuts and bolts of how creation and, well, everything else is managed.
Now there's this phrase in the verse, Janmādy Asya yathā. And this part is absolutely crucial. What it's saying is that this absolute truth isn't just the spark that started everything. It's the origin point for the entire cosmic life cycle. Creation, maintenance, and yep, even destruction. The beginning, the middle, and the end.
That's a pretty huge concept to wrap your head around, right? So the commentary gives us this really helpful analogy. It says to think of the absolute truth like the chief engineer of some super complicated construction project. The engineer isn't out there physically laying every single brick, but you better believe they know the entire blueprint. They know every single nook and cranny because the whole thing, it's all happening under their direction.
And this idea of a master plan, it leads us straight into another really big idea in this verse. It's this distinction between the reality we see and touch every day and a higher, more fundamental spiritual reality. To explain this, the verse uses some pretty vivid language. It talks about being bewildered by illusory representations, like seeing water in a fire or land on water. It's basically talking about a mirage, like when you're in a desert and you swear you see water up ahead. From a distance, it looks totally real, but it's not. The verse is hinting that our perception of this material world can be a lot like that, kind of bewildering.
And this table here just lays it all out perfectly. You've got two columns. On one side, spiritual reality. That's the original, the permanent, the real water. And on the other side, you have the material manifestation. That's the reflection, the temporary mirage. The Sanskrit word for this is amrisha, which is so interesting. It means something like almost factual, but not the real deal, not the ultimate truth.
So, and this is the key takeaway here. The text isn't saying that our world is fake or doesn't exist. Not at all. What it's saying is that its reality is, it's borrowed. The best way to think about it is like a shadow. I mean, a shadow is real. You can see it, right? But it has no existence of its own. It completely depends on the object that's casting it. That's the idea here.
Okay, but we're not just talking about the source of matter and energy like a cosmic Big Bang. The verse goes a step further. It says this ultimate source is also where all knowledge comes from.
And there are two really important Sanskrit words here that we need to know. The first is abhijñaḥ. This means being fully aware, or cognizant, knowing literally everything, both directly and indirectly. The second is sva-rāṭ, which means being completely independent. You don't need anyone or anything else for your knowledge or your power.
This chart really puts it into perspective. According to the text, there's only one being who has both of those qualities, the Supreme Lord. Everyone else, and they mean everyone, from Brahma, who's considered the creator of the universe, all the way down to a tiny little ant, is neither fully cognizant nor fully independent. There's a fundamental difference.
So how does knowledge get out there then? Well, the verse explains it. It says that Brahma, the very first living being, didn't just invent creation out of thin air. He couldn't figure it out on his own. He actually had to meditate, and then, The knowledge of how to create was given to him directly from that ultimate independent source.
So you might be thinking, okay, this is some cool cosmic philosophy, but so what? Why does any of this matter? Well, this isn't just some mental puzzle. According to the commentary, there's a very real, very specific point to understanding all of this.
See, the text itself, the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, is described as a tool for transformation. It's even called the spotless Purana, and its whole goal is to help the reader move step by step from this temporary, illusory world to a state of, well, pure spiritual realization. It's a roadmap. And the commentary actually lays out a kind of path. It's a gradual process. First, you get yourself qualified, through certain practices like mantra meditation and by developing qualities of goodness. It says that only then can you really step into that transcendental space and start to truly appreciate, to relish the really deep spiritual truths that are packed into the text.
Which, brings us full circle. The very last line of the translation is, I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. It's both a conclusion and a call to action. It takes all this mind-bending cosmic knowledge and focuses it down to one single point, meditation on that absolute truth.
So, where does that leave us? Well, with a pretty profound question, actually. If this text is right, if our day-to-day reality is kind of like a shadow or a mirage, just a temporary reflection of something way bigger, then it really makes you stop and think. What is that original thing? What is that permanent reality? What then is truly real?